I still hear organizations say, we really need to get in the 21st century. And I'm like, the 21st century, that was like the year 2000. That was like AOL dial-up days. Like, what do you mean get in the 21st century? There's like some mental framing we have got to like bust out of big time where it's like, no. It is about to be 2021. That is 1/5 of the way through this century. That is where we are. And then put that with what I said before, the underinvestment in digital pre-pandemic. It's like, that is I will say, to be positive, that's a good thing coming out of all of the pandemic, is that we are so far accelerating this issue in particular on digital and our content. And it's really accelerated that for us. And that's a good thing to come out of this.
Hey everybody, this is Chris from honestypill.com. You're listening to episode 7 of the Honesty Pill podcast. This season on the show, I'll be talking to innovative musician entrepreneurs who have created new ways of performing, new ways of teaching, and new ways of serving their audiences. My guest today is Aubrey Bergauer, one of the most dynamic trailblazers in the music industry, on a mission to redefine the classical music experience as we know it. Sound ambitious? Keep listening. Aubrey has led the charge in not just engaging, but retaining new audiences. What a concept, right? And we talk about a few really disturbing audience statistics that you're not going to believe. Aubrey is also going to bust a few myths about why free concerts don't work in the long run, why it just doesn't matter if you wear jeans and a t-shirt to a concert hall, and how human connection is the way to create real brand loyalty. And if you're a solopreneur who hates public speaking or thinks that they hate sales and marketing, Aubrey is going to give you some perfect solutions for that too. I've been looking forward to this episode for months, so stop whatever you're doing, stop practicing, stop doing the dishes, and get ready to take some notes, because this conversation is going to dig deep on some big issues. Aubrey, I could sit here and read your complete bio, but it'll probably take up the rest of the show. So instead, I'm just going to say thank you for joining me today. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Oh, Chris, me too. Thank you for having me.
So you have had such an impact in such a wide variety of areas in our industry: orchestras, opera companies, theater, dance, visual arts, museums. It just goes on and on and on. And you describe yourself as being on a mission to change the narrative for arts organizations and make classical music more accessible. So what is the current narrative? How would you describe it in terms of, getting what we do as artists into the hands of our audiences, keeping them engaged, keeping them inspired, and keeping them coming back?
Yeah. Oh, the current narrative. Well, let's talk about pre-COVID and then maybe a little bit of the narrative of COVID, because it is evolving. But I think it is important to talk about both, because pre-COVID, I'll even say right out of the gate, I don't like the idea that we should go back to the way it was before. So that narrative was declining audiences, or at least declining loyalty in our audiences. Pre-pandemic, I love this statistic. I mean, it's a terrible statistic, but I love citing it. Orchestras pre-pandemic had less than 30 days working capital, which, and the bigger the budget, the less working capital they had. So the narrative pre-pandemic was not so great. Fleeting audiences, fleeting loyalty, a focus on acquisition over retention, not enough investment in digital. I know you and I want to talk about that. Pre-pandemic, arts organizations were investing on average about 30% of their marketing budget in digital, compared to all other industries, average of 45%. So all of that's the narrative pre-pandemic. That's the narrative I'm out to change. During the pandemic, as we know, it's a travesty. It has decimated our industry. We know, even beyond classical music, we know communities of color have been disproportionately affected by all of this. It's not good. I don't have to tell anybody that. We know. But also, I would say the current narrative is a little bit to wallow in that, is what I see. And I disagree with that. I think that out of challenge comes opportunity, even though it is tragic what's happening. I believe that you take all these narratives and to me, for somebody who's all about changing it, I feel like what we have before us is a real opportunity to find ways to do business differently as we come out of this.
That's a fantastic point. And I love the fact that you mentioned, let's not wallow, because there is a lot of opportunity here. A lot of boundaries that were up are gone. And it's a mindset thing. And it's a hopeful mindset and what we can do to move forward, rather than just say, this is all I know how to do. I only know how to perform. I only know how to market this way. This is it. Well, if that's your reality, then that is going to be what your experience is. But I agree with you. There's a lot we could move forward in being innovative and challenging ourselves to bring in people who want to support what we're doing and creating something that's brand new. All right, we're going to dig into all of this stuff. I want to hit your background a little tiny bit because I imagine when you were a kid growing up, you weren't thinking about becoming an executive director. You started out your musical life as a tuba player in Houston, right? And you even went to Rice. So when did it occur to you that running an orchestra was like a thing that people do?
Well, it's so funny you said that. As a kid, I probably wasn't thinking about it because I'm the only person I know who was actually thinking about it.
Okay.
So, but you're right. It's like nobody's story ever that at a young age, administration occurred to them. And so quickly, the story is that, as you said, I was a tuba player. I was serious. I loved it. I loved being the girl that was beating all the boys. Like, oh, so much about that is just true to who I am today. And I was like that kid in the orchestra. I was in the Houston Youth Symphony, won the concerto competition, like that, one of those kids. And I remember though, the youth orchestra went through an executive director change. I had won that audition in 8th grade. By the time I was a sophomore, I'd been in the orchestra a couple years. We went through this executive director change. And I remember being 16 years old, sitting at the back, and they introduced this new person to us and said like a sentence or less about what that was. But it was enough for me to realize, oh my gosh, there is a job managing this entire operation. That's the job I want. And it just completely opened things up for me that I can love classical music. I can love playing my instrument, but there are opportunities for me that don't depend on me playing my instrument for the rest of my life. And that was so liberating to me. And from that point on, I was laser focused, still pursued the performance degree that was important to me, also a degree in business to try to start combining those ideas in my life.
You must have been a really interesting 8th grader, talking about like the fact that you even said, yep, I won that audition when I was in 8th grade. Those are sentences that don't generally come out of kids' mouths at that age. So you've been very competitive and motivated for a long time, it sounds like.
Yes, that is true. And I think, well, it's so funny when, whenever I start sort of like self-analyzing, like even the things we've talked on, changing the narrative. I was a female tuba player. I was, thinking about winning and all of those things I think are so interesting when we look back on our lives and realize those threads that are really just so core to who we are now.
For sure. So let's fast forward to 2014 is when you started with the California Symphony, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
So you have had such a positive impact there. What would you say is the biggest difference between what most arts organizations are doing in terms of running the business side of things and what you were trying to do and did and had such a big impact in the California Symphony?
I get asked this question a lot. It's hard to give one answer. I will, but I think honestly, we did a ton of little things, which I think is important to know that I don't think we it wasn't rocket science in so many ways, but it was like a lot of little changes that really added up. But if I had to summarize it all into one thing, I would say the biggest shift was that we put the customer at the center of what we did. And from that, the ripple effect, it does start changing a lot of different decisions that we made institutionally.
A lot of things that are profound are simple. And that what you just said, putting the customer at the front end of it is something that when I coach people about marketing themselves as musician entrepreneurs, whether it's a small one-person business or something enormous like a large arts organization, is you really have to ask people what they want. You can presume, but you're probably going to miss a lot of the targets. So you quote a really disturbing statistic in one of your talks about American orchestras and first-time concert goers. Can you tell us what that stat is and unpack it a little bit?
The statistic among American orchestras is that 90% of first-time attendees never come back again. 90% of first-time attendees never come back again. And that stat, I'll just say, is about 10 years old now. It hasn't changed much. So that national analysis was done, like I said, about 10 years ago. Now, any orchestra and pretty much opera company as well that I've worked with, their individual data shows that is still, for the most part, still holding true.
What does that mean? Does that mean our audience are becoming less interested or less loyal? What's happening? That I had no idea until I read or saw your talk that stat was reality. I would have guessed 40%, maybe 50%, but not 90%.
Yeah. So, I love this. You're asking such great questions, Chris. So what does it mean? It means that we talk about changing the narrative. The narrative, probably so many of us have heard, is that we need new audiences. We need younger audiences. That's what we say. And that statistic, what does it mean? It means we're not bad at attracting new audiences. We're actually pretty good at attracting new audiences. Where we struggle is to retain them. So yes, it is a loyalty issue. And it's funny, you said you thought maybe it was 50% or so. Another alarming statistic is among first-year season ticket holders, first-year subscribers, that renewal rate is about 50%, which is another very, like I said, alarming number.
Wait, so let's break that down. So you're saying, okay, so let's just make sure this is clear. First-time concert goers, 90% never come back. Mm-hmm. Now you're talking about subscribers, first-year subscribers, 50% of them don't renew. Is that what you just said?
That's what I said. Yeah.
These are not sustainable numbers.
Exactly. So then when I say like pre-pandemic, things weren't that rosy, that's the narrative I want to change of, I believe loyalty is possible. I believe growth is possible. Hopefully we'll get into that. But so that's when I'm out to change the narrative, that's the narrative. We don't have to accept that. I mean, it's baseline. So we need to accept that those numbers are true and that's reality, but we can change those numbers.
That's incredible. I want to talk more about how subscriptions are important in a minute, but I want to focus on something you said about the future being kind of a hybrid and how sports have so much in common with the arts. Dedicated showings, game times, specific costumes, our uniforms, concert dress, and established conventions for both the performers and the audience and their behaviors. Like nobody ever leaves a basketball game early if they're a big fan because you never know when a miracle might occur, right? So like, how do you recognize and engage our audiences moving forward? What do you think? Should we have choose your own ending style concerts?
Oh, that's so funny. No, I would say I do love the sports classical music analogies. Love it because there are a lot of things in common. What is different is that, actually, let me start with another thing that's the same, and then I'll say what's different. What is the same is that familiarity matters. We know we go, like we said, all those sort of customs at a sports game. We know at the seventh inning, we stand and stretch and, those sort of things. Like we know these are customs that we have. At orchestra concerts, as you said, there are also many customs and traditions we have, and lack of familiarity to start marrying this with this first-time buyer retention statistic. Lack of familiarity is part of the reason that we're losing some of those people and not retaining them. And so, to try to tie all this together, if it's not that we need choose your own adventure or choose your own ending, it's that the familiar part in sports, the rest of it is so familiar, it allows for that little bit of unknown, and that's the suspense. At a classical music concert, especially for first-timers, there's so much unknown that it's like everything, as much as we can do as organizations to help people feel welcome, feel comfortable, fill in those gaps, fill in those blanks, that's better. So hopefully that nuance of like the similarities and where it's different than sports makes sense.
I was going to ask you to dispel one myth in our industry, but actually, if you don't mind, can I suggest one that I'm curious about your thoughts? The myth or the notion that the subscription model is dead and it doesn't work in this country, it doesn't work in orchestras, and that nobody is subscribing the way they are, and single ticket sales represent the future. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I love this question. Okay, so I do think that's a myth. I do not think the subscription is dead. Let's think about it. The subscription model is more prominent today than it ever has been. We consume content on subscription, Netflix, Spotify, all those services. We do, like Dollar Shave Club on subscription. I get my dog's food delivered to my door every 2 weeks on subscription. Like, it's just so pervasive in our lives right now. So the subscription model, like I said, is more prominent than ever before. So I do not believe subscriptions are dead. What is different is human behavior and consumer behavior is changing. So we have to adapt our subscription model to fit that. So consumers, we talk about loyalty, consumers are so much more choosy about the brands that they are loyal to, the brands that they do endorse, that they do want to spend their money with. And so it's no longer enough to be about inertia. I've subscribed to the orchestra for years, therefore I just keep going because my family always has, or like that. There is value to habit forming, so I'm not trying to say there's not, but it's not just like an intrinsic value, therefore I keep doing it. It's no, the brands that consumers really endorse and therefore are loyal to and subscribe to are the ones that have had a connection with them, are the ones that are more human in many ways. So the good news is that fandom loyalty is still super achievable. You and I have talked about that before. So on the classical music side, does that mean that the 18, 20 week fixed seat subscription shouldn't change? No, it means that, that's the part that maybe isn't working for us so more. But there is data that shows that like a choose your own subscription model, those are definitely on the rise. And like I said, fandom and loyalty is achievable. It's just how do we package it to make it fit what consumers are wanting and needing now.
So how do we package it? I mean, that's the question, right? And one of the things that you mentioned in one of your talks also was the number one tool you can use to make sure you're delivering to your customers, your audience, your clients, your students, your subscribers, is to listen to them, to actually ask the question, what is it that we're not doing for you that you expected? Or what can we do that you didn't expect? And I want to talk a little bit about a pretty massive laboratory experiment that you participated in, created at California Symphony, which is the Orchestra X project. I am so intrigued at this idea. And the reason I'm asking you about it, a lot of people who listen to this podcast are not going to be running orchestras, right? But a lot of them are working in arts organizations. And more interestingly for them is they are creating their own micro versions of these arts organizations. They are learning how to market. They are learning how to advocate for themselves. They're learning how to position their skills, their point of view, their superpowers to an audience that doesn't know them, especially because we don't have a team. We don't have an Aubrey working for us. So how do you get that information? You said, just ask them. So talk about Orchestra X a little bit.
The Orchestra X project was, I talk about putting the customer at the center. That was really an exercise and experiment in doing that. And so in its simplest form, it was a focus group, discussion group. To explain that a bit, we decided, really in response to that 90% no return statistic, decided, well, let's try to figure out why that is. Why is that happening? So we put out the call for people who, quote unquote, should go to the symphony but don't, meaning people who are smart, culturally aware, have expendable income, do frequent other live entertainment options. We said, if that's you, but for whatever reason you don't go to the symphony, we want to hear from you. And we said, here's the deal. You can come to as many concerts in the season as you want for the price of $5 each. Again, this was not a marketing ploy. This was research. And the reason $5 not free is because free has no value. Free has a high dropout rate. And we wanted these patrons to have to go through the purchase path online because that is part of the experience that we wanted feedback on. And we said, so you can come to as many concerts as you want. If you want to bring a companion, that's another $5. But there's one concert in particular that's required so that there's a shared experience for everybody from which to be the basis of the discussion. So we did that. And then we had this discussion group, and we started with everything from their first visit to our website all the way through buying a ticket. What were they looking for? What information were they seeking? All the way to coming to the venue, all these different touch points. And then the music itself, the concert, the performance, the program book, all of that stuff too. I mean, we really just looked at everything. And it's so interesting. This is really what we learned, to boil it down, is the music itself is not the problem. Nobody said, I just need more Beethoven, or if you could play more Harry Potter in concert, that'd be really great. Like, nobody said any of that. Nobody said I need a shorter concert. It wasn't that. The feedback we heard was, wow, your website reads like Inside Baseball. Sports, here we are. But wow, and not in a good way, right? And wow, your website reads like Inside Baseball. There's so much vocabulary and technical language and jargon that I don't understand. And again, these are smart adults, but it became clear to me they don't know words such as concerto. Well, guess what word is on just about every single program we perform? So things like that. They don't know words like instrumentation. So they're reading program notes and it's just like, whoa, means nothing to them. So it was so jarring to me. And I realized in hearing all of this feedback, I thought, Aubrey, you were at a crossroads. Our promise to this group of people, and this was very difficult, was to say we will listen only and not jump to defense. So inside my brain was all of the reasons, we can't do that online because it's expensive, or we can't do that online because our ticket provider makes that difficult, or whatever. So I have all these things going through my brain of like, well, here's why that is, or what will our core audience think, or whatever. And I just realized, Aubrey, you're at a crossroads. You can either actually listen and act on this feedback you're hearing, or you can stick your head in the sand and keep doing things the way you always have been. And I chose the former. I just remember thinking, and I also was thinking, well, wait until you're back at a bigger organization and have more resources and blah, blah, blah. And then I finally just said, Aubrey, this will be your experimental ground to test this on. And so we did. We started making changes, and it goes right back to the customer at the center. And then that starts changing, like the way we talk about our product, the words we use on our website, the way we try to like educate people, because all of this in many ways came down to, I realized we preach as a industry so much that the decline in music education, public music education in this country is a big reason why we see declines in our audiences. And I realized, why do I preach that? And yet I had done nothing over, my last decade of experience prior to that to change the way I talk about what we do. And so it doesn't mean dumb it down. It doesn't mean, I don't know, whatever other words we use to like think we're doing something lesser than, but I realized, no, it just means we got to fill in that knowledge gap. That is so important. So I could go on and on and on, but that's the Orchestra X project, and just really realizing the music is not the problem, but everything tangential to the experience kind of was. And that's what we really started tackling.
Before we leave the topic of Orchestra X, can you give us a few examples of some of the feedback you were getting from people? You mentioned the program notes were reading like, statistically or lots of jargon. What else were people saying? Is this, as far as I know, this type of question has never been asked of an orchestral audience before.
Yeah, we heard things like, let's see here. This was interesting. It was about like setting the expectations. So it's not that like there were a lot of millennials participating in this, some younger Gen X participants too. So slightly younger than sort of our core audience. And that was part of the goal as well. But I hear a lot, like people think like, oh, young people don't want to dress up. That was not the case of this group. There was so much anxiety and stress over what to wear. And it wasn't because they didn't want to dress up. It was because they had no idea what was appropriate. Do I need to wear a tuxedo? Do I need to wear not a tuxedo? Like, do I need to, is jeans okay or jeans not okay? Like one person said, I wore my Mr. Rogers sweater. Like he didn't know what to do. And he's like, the best thing I got is my Mr. Rogers sweater, and it was just so interesting listening to this group of people and just hearing the anxiety over what to wear. Has nothing to do with a single note that we played. So there was that. We learned also, I spoke about education and filling in the knowledge gap. Now I'm sort of moving to like the unspoken expectations, unspoken cultural norms at an orchestra concert. When to applaud. I'm not here to have a debate over when to applaud or not. I personally don't care. I feel like if somebody has an expression, an emotional reaction, like let them express that. But regardless of anybody's thoughts on when to applaud or not, the problem is the same. They didn't know when. They didn't know what was okay or what was not. And then you put that with like, if they clap at the wrong time and then somebody next to them shushes them, well, do you think they want to come back? No, they were embarrassed and somebody was kind of rude to them. Like those things matter. And again, it has nothing to do with the art itself. There's that. I'll just quickly say on program notes in particular, the person who writes program notes for the California Symphony is also the person who writes program notes for San Francisco Symphony. And I say that to say like very qualified, totally a scholar, wonderful person. And we get to this part of program notes in the discussion, and this group starts saying to me, the required program they went to had Rachmaninoff's Second Symphony. They start saying to me, Rachmaninoff's Second Symphony should have never happened. And I was like, what do you mean? And they start saying to me, Aubrey, his first symphony was a disaster. And then he waited 20 years to write his second. But oh my gosh, he had so much gumption. And when he finally did, it was so amazing. And I'm like, what is happening? Like with these first time people who are now like, Rock 2 super fans. So I start probing with more questions. And I realized this is on top of all the feedback of like, everything else was very dry. Everything else had technical language. They don't know instrumentation, all those things we said. And it occurs to me, it's the story that they remembered. And they even said, whoever wrote those program notes on the Rachmaninoff should write them all. And I'm like, well, the same person did write them all. And I realized, no, it's the story behind the music that made so much impact. And it's what they remembered that they were repeating to me in a discussion group 2 weeks later. So that really changed in how we approach our program notes. And I'll just wrap that up by saying we went back to our program annotator and said, hey, this is the feedback we're hearing. Do you think you could focus more on the stories behind the music and the composer's life and all of that in all of your notes going forward? And his answer was, are you kidding me? There are so many salacious stories in classical music I could be telling, like, no problem. And that's what we did. And anyways, I'll just wrap this up. I'm getting long-winded, I know, but I'll just wrap it up by saying it really just became so clear. It was everything else tangential to the music, everything else about the experience that was off-putting, unwelcoming, intimidating. And when we started fixing and adjusting those things, our retention rate ended up going way, way up.
That is so brilliant. And that is why I love to wrap people into watching opera, because they're like, oh, opera. It's stuffy and hoity-toity. I don't understand it. I can't relate to it. This is old music by dead white guys. And I was like, well, some of it is. But if you like Game of Thrones, you're going to like The Ring. There's so many elements of, murder, intrigue, mystical things. But we fail as artists and as art organizations to ever communicate that. And all people see from the outside is, that's not for me. I can't access that. And I'm embarrassed and I get uncomfortable. I just want to talk about the applause thing for a second. I also feel like if you're happy and you know it, clap your hands, right? If you hear something great, I want to hear it. I love hearing people cheer when they, when you play at the Hollywood Bowl for a John Williams concert and it sounds like a jet engine out there of people screaming. That's exciting for me. It's exciting for John Williams too, I bet. But if you're going to go to a Brahms Requiem and, the arc of the composition is important, if somebody claps, instead of shushing them, that's an opportunity to say, let me explain to you why the composer wrote these movements in the sequence and what they're from, and why it's important to sort of get immersed in the whole experience. But you know what? At the end of the day, if you like it, clap. I'm happy to hear it.
Yeah. I mean, it shows that people are having an emotional reaction to what we're doing. Like, that's good news.
What a crazy idea, right? I want to share something I read on your website. You wrote, theater, dance, and music can do more than just adapt to current constraints. They can create new productions that rewrite the rules. So we've kind of touched on this a little already, but if you had a crystal ball, and a magic wand, what would you imagine for those new productions? If there were no limitations, what would you do?
Oh, gosh. Okay. I think, and this is sort of post-pandemic world where it's safe to gather again. But I think maybe you said this already, the future is hybrid. I think there's something to that. So I'll say, first of all, though, what we do, like the live performance, what we do as live performance is untouchable. I believe that. That is what we do best. I do not think that will change. That is our bread and butter. But I also believe that the digital component is not to be forgotten. And I believe that the digital component is a gateway to build up, like we said before, those fans, those audiences that we need. And when we go back to saying, like, familiarity matters, well, our digital offerings are a vehicle to help make that happen. So when I think the future is hybrid, what I would love to do is have that component. Like, I don't think we need to be streaming our whole concerts for free. I don't think we need to give away the farm for free. We need people to pay to consume what we deliver. That is part of our business model that's essential. So hear that. But what if we always streamed the first 10, 20 minutes of a performance? I don't know. That's kind of interesting to me. What if we give people a taste and then we leave them wanting more? That feels pretty good to me. I also think, this maybe sounds silly, but I think we should have IMAG in the concert hall. IMAG, for anybody who doesn't know, like at the Hollywood Bowl, when you've got the big screens on both sides and you're seeing the camera and the close-up of the musicians, that's cool. I think that's cool. I think a lot of people think that's cool. Even at the California Symphony, we did a little bit of experimenting with IMAG. And it's you can see close-ups of people that you don't get to see when you're sitting in whatever row, So I think that's interesting. And I think if we're streaming, then we already have those cameras there anyway. So why not just put the iMac up in the hall anyways? So, and like I said, none of this is totally revolutionary or rocket science or anything. I just think that some combo of that is really cool. I also would love to experiment with program notes that don't have to be in the program book. I serve on the board for Mason Bates' organization, Mercury Soul. And one of the things that they do super cool, in my opinion, is that all of their performances, part of their projections, they're putting up the interesting things we need to know. Composer, their living birth and death dates, a couple sentences about why that piece is interesting or whatever, like the same kind of stuff that probably would be in the program book. And they put that on the wall. And it's like, I think that's great. I didn't have to read a book. I didn't have to have a piece of paper in my lap, all that kind of stuff where I'm like, it just was integrated into the performance and not in this way where it was like, felt invasive or I don't know, something like that. So anyways, those, like I said, hybrid, those sort of integrations, I think there's something to that and would like to experiment with that.
This topic of cameras getting really close up on musicians has come up before on this show. And there are some pros and cons, right? Having cameramen running around the stage can be distracting on occasion. That might be okay. But the way that we're doing it now with the LA Phil at the Hollywood Bowl, for example, is there's no audience there. We're creating these recorded soundstage experiences where the cameras can get up close. And it does two things. It's interesting, I think, for people to see how instruments work and what it looks like and some beads of sweat coming off the soloists. But it also highlights for people who maybe are first timers who, have never tuned into something like this, what exactly to look at. It makes it easier to access what the composer would highlighting. You and I can look at a score and see, okay, this is accompaniment, this is the solo, this is an interesting part that's happening right here. You don't really know where to look sometimes. I mean, take Bolero for an example. You look at Bolero at the Hollywood Bowl, you're getting an orchestration masterclass and you're getting it up close. So I think there are opportunities there in this digital marketing and digital products. We haven't even tapped into the surface. I mean, what are we like? I want to talk about marketing in a second with you, but what are we, 40, 50 years behind the times is how we're putting our messaging out there? It's shocking to me how slow we are to catch up to other areas like sports, for example.
I still hear organizations say, we really need to get in the 21st century. And I'm like, the 21st century, that was like the year 2000. That was like AOL dial-up days. Like, what do you mean get in the 21st century? So I totally agree with you. We have got there's some mental framing we have got to bust out of big time where it's like, no, it is about to be 2021. That is 1/5 of the way through this century. That is where we are. And then put that with what I said before, the underinvestment in digital pre-pandemic. It's like, that is I will say, to be positive, that's a good thing coming out of all of the pandemic, is that we are so far accelerating this issue in particular on digital and our content. And it's really accelerated that for us. And that's a good thing to come out of this.
I absolutely love that you just reminded me of the AOL startup sound. I'm going to hear that in my mind now when my orchestra is tuning. I'm going to be hearing that sound and thinking, is this the best we can do? Can we get some fiber optic sort of engagement happening here? Can I circle back for a second on something you said about free content or free doesn't work? And you wrote a blog called Why I Don't Like Free Concerts and how we've kind of misconstrued the meaning of the word access. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because I have a client who I just had a conversation yesterday, and she was talking about giving away a lot of her services and product for free because she was like, well, people, they won't engage until they experience it a little. And I'm trying to get her to understand that it kind of devalues the experience and your product and your service if you're giving it, and they won't engage. They're not going to show up. They're going to show up with a free level of engagement. So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I love talking about this because so much of what you said, I totally agree with. Free has no value. What we do as artists, whether as solopreneurs or as part of an ensemble, what we do as artists has incredible value. We know that. We need to claim that. It has so much value. Therefore, do not give it away for free. Free has a high dropout rate. I said that when I was talking about the Orchestra X project too. That's true for free concerts. I think I hear organizations say well, this is how we get the people in. And first of all, that's not true. You might it's really hard to track that. First of all, you're not ticketing it. So how do you even know? They don't know. You can't collect data for something you have not charged for. Or some organizations are getting more savvy about a free registration. At least they're getting some patron information when they do that. but still the dropout rate and the no-show rate high, dropout rate high. So those are issues. This idea of access, I think, is so interesting. So a lot of times I hear the argument, our free concerts are what's accessible. Well, there's a lot of really, I think, backwards thinking baked into a statement like that. Access does not mean free. Accessible does not mean free. I would say it means reducing barriers to entry. And price is a barrier, but it's not the only barrier. I think, just charge $5 for the concert versus free if you want to keep it cheap and easy, and that's still accessible. Or a lot of orchestras and opera companies do have like starting tickets at $25 or so, not even student tickets. Like some organizations do offer those sort of entry price points. And it's like, okay, like that's for a lot of people. And I don't mean to sound insensitive, but for a lot of people, that is an affordable amount of money. So it's a really different conversation if we're trying to serve people who truly cannot afford a $20 ticket, a $25 ticket versus a strategy of we want to cultivate ticket buyers and future ticket buyers, which a lot of times on the free concerts, that is what organizations tell me. This is how we're going to cultivate new buyers. And it's like, why? You can't invite them back if you haven't tracked them. You can't, they've already attached no value to what you're doing. And you've trained them to believe that they don't need to pay anything for your product when it could have been, like I said, $25 is totally accessible for a lot of people. So anyways, I hope that all sort of makes sense. I will say one more thing on to your client's point of like what if we give a little bit away for free? I'm not opposed to that, and especially like experiment with it. Like when I talk about like, what if we stream 10, 20 minutes of the concert and then hopefully that leaves people wanting to like get the real thing, to purchase a ticket and come in person. Like that as a strategy I'm okay with. But I think like a freemium model versus flat out free is the more strategic play.
I want to shift gears and talk about some actual sort of back-end system business things with you, because a lot of the solopreneurs, like you mentioned, who are trying to learn how to pivot and create something new, create their own businesses, take their 10,000 hour skills and turn it into something. They don't know how to get it out there. They feel like, I'm not good at sales. I'm not good at public speaking. Can you define for me and then talk about why it's different than traditional methods of marketing? What is content marketing?
Yes. Okay. I love this. Content marketing is for anybody who thinks they hate sales or marketing. Content marketing is for you. And if you're not doing content marketing, but you still like marketing and sales, it's also for you. So, because it works. So content marketing is providing content. And there are a lot of different ways to provide content. So we can break that down. Providing content that is interesting or providing content that is meant to stimulate interest in what you're offering. Maybe that's a better way to say it. And so that doesn't mean, if we think about like social media, for example, it doesn't mean, I know we've all seen this, orchestras who post like, don't forget, get your tickets for this Sunday. And it's like, who is reading that thinking, oh, I almost forgot, I need to get my tickets for Sunday. Like just not how people operate. And so, but instead, when there's content like a blog post or content like a podcast or content like artists, oh my gosh, artists, you need to know your power. You have so much you can offer online that somebody like me, an administrator who does not practice or perform anymore, cannot offer because I don't have those skills anymore. Like you have so much power at your disposal. Please hear that. So to be able to offer that, the mini masterclass or, whatever way you want to like package that online, like that's interesting. And there are people who so badly want to read that, drink that, eat that, soak that up. That is content marketing. And not once do you ever have to say, buy now, click here, whatever. Seth Godin very famously talks about permission marketing. And so what we're doing is providing content and information that our audience values, that whoever's on the other end, reading, consuming, watching, that they value, that gives us permission then to every once in a while ask for what we need. So I've heard it described as like the 70-30 rule. By producing 70% content that really is helpful, informative, interesting, engaging, that gives us permission another 30% of the time to say, sign up for this. Join me when I present this. And that's then sort of the equation for, it's all marketing, but it's just less of that like salesy. We talk about like not being in the 21st century, that kind of like buy now, click here stuff. That's old school. Content marketing, current, relevant.
I'm so glad you said all of that, especially the part about, hey, artists, you have so much to offer. I feel like this is when I don't know, when there's a guest speaker in a classroom and the guest speaker says the same thing the teacher's been saying all semester, because I feel like I've been beating the drum for 3 years, maybe even 5, about you are more than just your instrument, how you define yourself, what you can offer. That is definitely one part of you, and it's definitely a big part of you. And I think that's great, but it's not the only part of you. And when that part of you goes away because your orchestra folded or the pandemic shut everything down, you have a choice at that moment to decide how you're going to respond to that. And you can fold and you can cry in your coffee, and that's okay. And I've definitely done that for many, many nights here during the past 8 months. At some point, you have to realize that there's more going on than just that. Speaking of flipping something around and turning it into a gem, you did a great thing. I want to talk about public speaking for a minute. You did a great thing with a talk where you're obviously scheduled to be on stage and present to this big room full of people, and you had broken your ankle or something, and you came walking out on stage with crutches. And you did something that I want to highlight because this was very skillful. Obviously, you're on crutches, right? So you have 2 choices. You can hobble out in silence, take a long time. Everyone's going to be awkward. And they're like, oh my God, I wonder what happened. They're not even listening to what you have to say. All they're thinking about is, why is she on crutches? What's going on? So you decided, okay, I totally need to lead with this. This is my hook. I'll be like, hey, everybody, raise your hand. How many of you have broken a bone? And you instantly connected with every single person in that audience and did my favorite speaking technique, which is to ask a question, because that person wants to know what I think or what my experience has been. And from that moment, you had that room in the palm of your hand. What tips would you give for solopreneurs, people who are just getting into the habit of getting in front of the camera, for public speaking or just for messaging in general? Because you are absolutely amazing at doing that.
Wow. Thank you, Chris, for all of that. I really appreciate that. And you're right. It was all intentional. So I'm just so appreciative that like you saw that. That's awesome. So yeah. Okay. Other tips. I mean, you're right. Questions are so great. Who here's broken a bone before? Great. Either way, you have an answer to that question and you're engaged. And that's important too. Like, what are questions that you want people nodding along? Like, so whether that's an easy question, or this is good advice also for interviews too. I know we have so many artists and performers on here, but if there is anybody looking at interviews for administrative position or other types of roles, you want the person on the other end, whether it's public speaking or interview, nodding along. So say you want to say statements that people can agree with. And then from there, you can get more into like your point from that. This is so administrative focused, but like whenever I am talking with organizations and they ask me a question about the board, like no matter what that question is, like usually the first statement out of my mouth is, the relationship between the board and the CEO is so important. And everybody's nodding along. Yeah, it's so important. And then from there, I can go on and answer their question or whatever. So like those kind of statements, like you want people agreeing and nodding along. That's important. And so it's the same thing with the question of like, yeah, getting their buy-in. Another way to do that is ask a question or say your statement, right? We're having a great podcast, right? That's another way you get people nodding along with what you're saying.
I'm nodding along right now.
Yeah, I'm like literally physically nodding along. Yeah. So those things are all tips I've been given that hopefully help people listening to this. Yeah, I think if you do that, and then I would also say in terms of public speaking, always know the talking points. These are the 3 big points I want to get across. And then from there, don't be so robotic or rigid about everything else. If you know your main thing, that allows you to be human as you're sort of filling in the gaps. And I've really had to work on that because I used to really want to be like, no, I need to say all the things in the way I want to say them. And I've had to really work on it. Like, no, Aubrey, you know your content, you know your main points. So give yourself some freedom there.
Another really basic takeaway, you could have canceled that appearance. You could have been like, I broke my ankle, I can't. And that would have been the end of it. And maybe there's somebody in that room that you completely changed their outlook or their life or propelled them into some action that if you hadn't showed up because of your broken ankle, that never would have occurred. So show up, people. Like, you need to be in the room. 90% of success is just showing up. And, you may have a broken bone or your shirt may not be pressed. Nobody cares. Like, they actually don't even care about you at all. And that's why you don't lead with, "Hi, my name is Chris and I'm a trumpet player with the LA Phil." Nobody cares. They want to know like why I'm there or what problem can I solve for them. That's basically that's how I approach content marketing. Is you're not going to hear my name or my brand until I've already like encouraged you to, or not encourage you, but
like you have them farther enough along in like the relationship, even if it's a new relationship, like then they want to know, oh, what's his story? Yeah,
exactly.
Exactly. Yeah, who you are, what you do. Yeah.
Okay, rapid fire question. What's your earliest musical memory?
I remember, oh God, I had to have been like 2 years old or less. My dad always played records in the house. He's a super audiophile and all kinds, not just classical. I did not come from a super musical family, but I do remember him playing the Firebird on record. The Firebird and Michael Jackson. Those are the two big albums I like remember him playing. And I was like equally captivated by both pretty much.
Can I just say, I love these weird juxtapositions I hear when I ask that question. That's a good one. I have one too. Philip Jones Brass Ensemble and John Denver.
Yes.
How about that? It kind of made me who I am. I don't know what that means, but all right, that's fantastic. God, there's so much more I could talk to you about. I can't let you get out of here, Aubrey, without talking about a particular socially distanced activity you recently participated in that was actually caught on video that involved some safety goggles, an office printer, and a baseball bat. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit? What was going on there?
This is so funny. I just wrapped up a year-long contract at the San Francisco Conservatory of Music, and the marketing and communications team there, weeks ago, we had joked about like, we need an Office Space style, like printer smashing. And we had not seen each other all together since February, even before the pandemic. Somebody was on vacation. So it was like even longer that we hadn't all been together. And, so it was like to combine all those things, like wrap up going away, like let's get out some super aggression. Like somebody on the team got like a free broken printer off Craigslist. And then we went to the park and they brought a baseball bat and they were like, we're doing this. And it was so much fun. I never knew like actually doing that would be so fun, but it really was.
I'm guessing you didn't make any friends over at Hewlett Packard with that video, but you totally connected with all the Office Space fans. And fun fact, if you don't know what we're talking about when we talk about Office Space, just stop the podcast, stop everything, and go watch Office Space. You need to watch it right now, and several times too. All right, everybody, I hope you are all taking notes on all this stuff. Aubrey, that was amazing. And I think everyone listening, your next stop should be aubreybbergauer.com/writing. Tell us where else our audience can connect with you online, Aubrey.
Yeah, I'm on every social media channel pretty much at Aubrey Bergauer, Instagram, Facebook professional page, Twitter, LinkedIn. Please follow me. Please find me. I would love to connect with you.
Awesome. I'll link all this up in the show notes. And Aubrey, thanks so much for being here. I hope we can get together and smash something with a baseball bat when this pandemic finally lets up. I am totally ready to do that.
Let's do it. Thank you.
Big thanks to Aubrey Bergauer for joining us today. Wow, so much information. We didn't even get to cover half of the topics on my list. If you want to hear more from Aubrey and how she's changing the narrative for the classical music industry, check out the show notes for all those links. And then here's my challenge to you. Do something about it. Take some action, participate in the conversation, because you have just as much potential as me or Aubrey or anyone else to impact big change in our industry, and we're going to need that moving forward. By the way, before I sign off today, I hope these interviews are starting to get you thinking about where you are in your career right now, what your performance schedule looks like, how your teaching methods or studio has changed, and what your bank account looks like. Whether you're sitting in a full-time orchestra job, you're a freelance musician, or a music educator, there are so many opportunities available to you right now, even during this global pandemic, if you're willing to open your mind to possibility, if you can be honest with your limiting assumptions, and if you're willing to try something new. I don't think it's a secret by now that I'm spending the majority of my time at Honesty Pill talking to musicians about how they can turn the skills developed in 10,000 hours in a practice room into wildly successful and fulfilling online businesses. If you have ideas, questions, or just want to talk about where you're at in your musical life right now, you at least owe yourself a conversation. And if you already have an idea for a business, then I really want to talk to you. Shoot me an email at chris@honestypill.com and let's connect. Okay, that's it for me today. This has been the Honesty Pill Podcast, Episode 7. You can find out more at honestypill.com. Check out the free resource library. Lots of good stuff over there. Thank you so much for listening. See you next time.